Hello and welcome to Phoenix Vision. I'm Jess Palmer, and my guest today is none other than my good buddy Patrick Ray. We're doing a live as well. Yeah. So yeah, it's the second live I've done. I was very happy to be doing it with you, mate. We've got the laid back vibe going on. So yeah, Patrick is many things, but first and foremost, a good friend. This guy is an absolute relentless beast when it comes to helping others, driving community projects, and generally being an agent of service to this world. We met on one of his courses a few years ago. It's called Body Transformation Academy and have followed similar paths since. He's currently a teacher, which I'd love to get into in the podcast, working with a wide scope of different kids, including mentally handicapped and those from disadvantaged backgrounds. I know you're not working with those kinds of kids anymore, but
Well, you work with more of them than you might anticipate
yeah,
in a deprived environment.
yeah, I hear that.
You
I
would
hear that.
actually, yeah.
Yeah. So Patrick has about four planets in Gemini, and currently is Sun and Moon in Gemini. So expect to be listening to this podcast for about 4 hours. So, brother, thank you so much for coming on, mate. We've been wanting to do this for like a year.
We have me and Jess as in funny. Me and Jess as in like we said like for many years because me and Jess like we are too similar on many things as in and then like we were just like really hit it off one day after meditation. And we sat down for talking for like 5 hours, like a year ago, actually,
Like,
in the same sun moon conjunction in Gemini, where we just like talked for like 4 hours
yeah,
breathlessly.
yeah.
Um, so
Um,
yeah, it kindled the thing here, but as
yeah.
in, we here we are.
Yeah, I wanted to dive into that in the podcast because it's quite a funny thing because we didn't like each other for years, did we?
No, we didn't. We didn't. But no, we like obviously like, when like just came on as a client and it was amazing. And then we just didn't see each other for like many years.
Yeah,
And then we were on a retreat and it was just like we're just like, oh Jess, geez, he's not liking the vibe, you know? Just like boiling. I was like, oh well. And then we just it just kept sizzling. But the things
then Poland.
yeah, in
Yeah,
Poland, and we just kept in each other's orbits, and then yeah, we lived together. We just came out of living together for a year, which was awesome. Like,
yeah. I had a really great time, but it's funny because we just had this like cathartic time bonding like in this in this time where we've talked for 4 hours. We're bonding over astrology, and
oh
I'm really
man.
happy to be recording this podcast about astrology and your sign. But yeah, it was so funny because we realized that oh, hang on, we're like really different, but actually in some ways like very similar. And then we're like looking at our charts. It's like oh yeah, here's like 11 different reasons why we rub each other up the wrong way. It's like
It was healing, very healing.
yeah, so good times, good times. All right, brother. I'd love to kick off by asking you about your journey. What led you into becoming the person you are today? So, because I said becoming the person you are today because you just do so much more than just your teaching career. Because there's a lot that's in your constellation. So, yeah, if you could just give us a bit of a background about
Yeah,
yourself.
yeah, 100%.
Are
So
you comfortable? Should we put
oh
the cup?
yeah, no, I'm loving
Yeah.
it. I'm
Yeah. Okay.
loving it. So my day job, guys, I'm a school teacher, uh, teaching languages, and I like I've always been into education. I've always been to telling people what to do, as in well, I thought that's what education was historically. I learned otherwise. But it's really funny that there's one of the teachers in our in the lineage I'm in, and someone else says, "Oh, am I doing the right thing? Am I on the right path?" And he's like, "You're already doing it. You're already living your truth. You're already living your purpose." And someone else said, "Is like, it's only when you look back can you trace all the dots, put all the dots together." And for me, it's just always been about community and bringing people together. And at the moment, I'm a member of an intentional community called the Golden Beehive, and Jess and I live together just for a year there, and I'm still there, and it's just been always been community oriented, and it's really funny because as in what I understood was my way of accessing the world is through just creating, building, maintaining community and social structures in the world, and keeping people linked together. And my mother is just like the OG of this. She's like just always keeping people together. Like when I was a child, it was like one of the big things for the weekends was going to funerals. It was that was like the Sunday thing to do. She was like huge respect for the elderly. Um, so I kind of got it through there. And then when I was a kid, my father died, and so we had this big house, and my mom would like fill it up with students because she wanted to work from home. She liked her freedom, and I just got used to having a ton of people in the house at all times. And like I've surprise you guys, I've never lived alone, on like on my own. So it just and then if you guys are into astrology, but even if you're not, um they say at 28 that there's a planet Saturn, and Saturn is like the great teacher, and it like kind of bulldozes through a lot of structures of things that aren't working for you, of anything that's not really substantial. It will get rid of it at 28. And we hear a lot about the 27 club, and some people just they didn't make it,
Checked out, yeah.
they checked out, and at 28 I was in central London. I was running business things, they were beginning to disintegrate. They were just because it wasn't built on firm foundations, but what I really saw was the trappers in London was like the massive lack of community. And it was from there I was just like I'd always been looking for community. So how I met Jess was through the Body Transformation Academy, and one of the ways that we would meet people was through community, as in we'd just build up a sick community. And like I actually live with another one of the guys, a guy, me and Jess, common friend of mutual friend of Jess and I, Matt, lives with us. And like we still keep up with all of these guys, and they come out to meditations and whatnot. And it was always one community. And then I ran London's like largest in-person like monthly meditation. We'd have 60, 100 people coming out to meditate. But it was always with the in-person community. It was like even the meditation was just a reason to come together and to share an experience. And then I live in a place where it's just very explicitly about community, of people who are here to do that. And it's funny because it just reveals itself. It kind of just reveals itself about that. And then to really ground it, the school system is actually the next nexus point at which people have to get together. As in at the moment in this country, unfortunately, the education system, it's become a bit economically stratified. As in the poor with the poor, the richer with the rich, the middle with the middle, and it's not as potent a meeting place as I feel like it might have been in the past. But then I could be talking rubbish because even education was elitist. 100 years ago, it was like like school. We didn't have common school. Like it wasn't for everyone, or at least not beyond a certain age. So it's just another way for me to interact in the community, and that's yeah, that's kind of my vibe. That's kind of my vibe, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I've always thought when you spoke, whenever you spoke about your schoolwork, I'm like, how lucky these kids that you're teaching are, because I know what you're like. You're like very dedicated person, as well as like very informative and very. I can see you creating something very nice for those kids. Put it that way, and yeah, to have you as a teacher, yeah, it would be a very good thing.
It's funny though, like I left the school today, guys. I just finished teacher training. Like today, I finished teacher training today, and I was told there's only one class I told that I was like leaving, and they were like, they didn't even care. And it's really funny. It's like teenagers, it's just like everyone's like, oh, Patrick, you'd be such a great teacher. And then just sometimes the kids just don't give a rat's ass.
Do,
And
do you not just have one that's just like, Mr. Ray, I love you? No?
the way people go on, like I would have, you think you'd expect that, but not like there's obviously a few kids you vibe with,
Yeah.
but it's not. Yeah, it's teenagers. They're funny. Like they are funny,
Yeah.
and a lot of people are afraid of teenagers. Like
Yeah.
teenagers scare the crap out of people. Like they.
Yeah.
It's a very interesting fire energy that they have.
Yeah.
It's very, it's very, yeah, they're difficult to work with.
Yeah. I hear that. I'm living with a teenager now, actually, and it is like it's really interesting navigation because talk to a kid in a certain way, you talk to an adult in a certain way, and then there's this teenager in this like middle ground of like, where's this common ground to find here? It's like it's different conversation, I guess. Like, well, you're going to be a lot more practiced at it than I do since you're hanging around with them all the time. But yeah, it's yeah, interesting navigation. Yeah.
It is, because it's like they're very egoic, and they're also terrified of being not in the crowd, not part of the unit, being
Mm.
out of the community, or being on the fringe. Like that's really death to the teenagers, and it drives very interesting behaviors.
Yeah, yeah, I hear that. I hear it. It taps into like one of our base human fears, isn't it? It's fear of exclusion, which is ultimately fear of death.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah, absolutely. And it's yeah, it's blowing my mind. It's blowing my mind at the moment. As in, I'm a total noob, but yeah, it's hard.
I
Like I
bet.
really respect like people who are like doing teaching like more than ever. It's just nuts.
Yeah, me too. Because yeah, there's a lot. It's a lot. The marking that they're under. Well, yeah, it's just like the energetically being with kids, all of that throughout that day, and having to do all of the work outside of it, lesson plans. It's just it's a lot. It's a lot.
It's fun.
So fair play to you, mate.
It's kind of like having your own YouTube channel where you're on every day, and you have
Yeah.
like and the audience are very critical.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't have the loving audience.
No, no, no.
Yeah,
Is that not just? It's not just that no one watches. It's like
yeah, the audience just waiting to heckle you.
So you got the hecklers. You really have the hecklers. Like
Just waiting for the chink in the armor.
100%, 100%.
Jokes. All right, mate. Let's get into astrology. So we are what I would term as astro geeks. So, mate, I'd love to ask you first on your broad perspective on astrology, because I think that a lot of the listeners might be quite like new to astrology. So I think giving it from your perspective of like the broad concept, and then for people who aren't so familiar, and then how the planetary bodies are influencing us, and then I'd love to ask more about the Gemini archetype. This is going to be a really good one for me as well, because like it's an archetype I don't tend to see so much, because like the Scorpio and the Gemini, they've got no aspects, so they kind of don't see each other. So inherently, like Gemini, I like I struggle to understand it. I've learned
Same
a
with
lot
me
from
and the Scorpio.
yeah.
Honestly, the same with me and the
They
Scorpio.
just don't see each other. So yeah, man. But I've learned a lot more from living with yourself. But yeah. So broad concept, and then what can you say about Gemini, brother?
So if you were to talk about astrology, some people say to me first, like, "Oh, I don't believe in astrology." I'm like, well, you might not believe in gravity either, but it still acts upon you. So astrology, as in heavenly bodies have an effect on us. As in, we have the sun. When the sun comes up, we have light, heat. When the sun goes down, we have cold, darkness. Like that's one astral body. So, and the sun is representative of vitality. So if there's no light, there's no food, there's no people, nothing lives. So that is just one aspect of it, and the sun is representative of vitality. Then we have the moon. The moon, because I did rowing a lot of rowing in my time, and if you came at the wrong time of day, the water wouldn't be there. As in, so like because I was in a tidal place, and that is affected, of course, by the moon. Mm. And all the waters in the world are affected by the moon. And astrology, the extends from that is like that all the heavenly bodies have an effect. So that's basically like astrology, and just trying to ground it. And my understanding of the birth chart is that it's the moment that you're born. It's it's like if the earth is a great big school, it's your classes. Like it's like this is like these are your skill sets. These are things you're good at, you're not so good at, your tendencies. But also you have an opportunity to work on the tendencies. And so what they call when the planets move around, and they're always moving around, we call them transits, as in so they're in transit, they're bobbling around in space. And I look at that, it's like it's your school schedule. It's like I've got this lesson right now. It's like And the beauty of learning about transits and like where the planets are, but first of all, you need to learn where you are, where you're standing, which is the birth chart, which is like gives a really nice imprint about that. But then with the transits, it's your classes, because you need to know, well, oh, I'm in maths class. So the thing is, if you don't know what class you're in, you're not going to know how to act, and it can be very good for resolving, anxiety and misunderstandings if you know what class you're in. Because there's some, if you're maybe you're in an exam, maybe you're in an assessment, and sometimes there's transits which are like that. When the planets are moving, certain planets are moving in a certain way, it can feel very testing. So, but it's good to know that you're in the test when you're in it, and it can resolve a lot of difficult feelings. So that would be my understanding of astrology, is just to keep it very practical minded.
Nice. To see a teacher archetype coming through really strong, really
Nice.
strong. It's a really nice analogy, man. Really nice.
Guys, take that one away. Honestly, that took me a while to figure that one out.
I've been thinking about a nice way to explain transits actually, but that's the one. That's the one.
It is, because guys, with the transits, it's all like, is in when you come into this life, here's your schedule. All your transits.
I guess like astrology, you've got an opportunity to actually see the schedule. Whereas it's like, we go through hard times in life and have no idea why something's happening to us. And sometimes something could be happening to us for 2 years. We're in a certain theme. And for me, having the context of astrology is just so helpful for that. It's like, for example, when I came in here, I had a Saturn transit Aquarius 4th house in a square, which is difficult.
So guys, Aquarius is representing of the community, science, friendship. 4th house is home. And Saturn is restriction, seriousness, deepening of thought. So it's just talking about the deepening of thought about community and the home.
Yeah, and also within that transit for myself, it was rough, but very transformative, and saw me transitioning from living on my own into community. So 4th house, home, Aquarius, community, Saturn, putting that restriction in there, and that I had to move out because I was basically dying from mold at the time. It's so interesting how the archetypal themes are always working. I was just saying before the call, actually, man, I noticed the other day there's a new superhero film called The Flash. It's about a dude who's like super fast, which is one of the qualities of Gemini. It's just like, just so happens to be released in Gemini season. Now, maybe the guys know about astrology, maybe they not, maybe it's some mad coincidence, but there's so many things I see like that, like in relation to what's happening up there, seeing what's happening down here, and it always correlates. It's so interesting.
And it's really interesting, just because if we think of the earth as a school, of our, as in souls, or your being or whatever, as in just as a tool for evolution. It's really interesting because, like, as in, when you're born, like, it's like I'm going to school this day, and people think, they're blaming the planets. Like, no, there's not the planets. It's just it's just I came in on this day to get this class because I'm coming for this class.
Yeah.
And how I act in the class, that's on me.
Yeah. I love this because this is like an astrology trap, like blame the moon for my situation.
Yeah. And she's like, no, it's like, we're in school. It's like, how you acted, it's on you. How you feel, no, we might not be able to control how we feel, but how you act, that's take responsibility.
What's this choice, isn't it? It's choice of how we express ourselves, or how we express our charts. Like, I remember Mateusz, who's astrologer friend of ours, we
a mentor as well.
Mentor, yeah. If anyone wants to check out Mateusz, the Aquarius podcast a little while ago, that was him, and he shared with me once that Hitler had all, like, if you look at his chart, he had all the makings of a kind, compassionate, loving guy, but through choice he went the other way. And that's like it's kind of like, the astrology is, I guess it's also like a hand, but it's up to us how we deal that hand, because otherwise, where's free will, right?
Absolutely. And self-effort, like what do we choose to do, but yeah.
So Gemini, what are we saying?
Guys, as in, so just asked me, he tried to brief me, and I'm like, I don't know, like, because I'm so in it, like I have no idea. I've no. That's what I say to Jess, but that's why Jess is going to help me out because
I don't know about Gemini. That's why you're on the podcast, mate.
That's we might be in for a short one here. but so I would have the sun in Gemini, so like my vitality is in Gemini, and then Mercury. So Mercury is like my thinking, my rationale, and then Venus. It's also like the beauty and it's also more like how I relate to people. All of those things in Gemini, and then I'd have Jupiter. Jupiter is the sign of abundance and philosophy. It's in the third house, which is in my chart, which is the house of Gemini. So I feel it's like saying to the fish, just like, so what's the water like? You know, what are you talking about? You know?
Yeah, but come on, mate. You studied astrology for long enough to have like a broad conception of Gemini, especially since you are so heavily Gemini.
What I can say is the Gemini mind, for better or for worse, it's very quick.
Yeah,
it's very quick, and it can grasp things very quick, but it can only be sometimes it might only be superficially, and there can be a resistance to going deeply into things and wrestling with the mind. So like I was just saying, I just posted a video on Facebook just about the notion of body, mind, and intellect, about how there are three different tools of the soul to navigate this space. And finally, because in Gemini the mind is so pervasive, it makes it very difficult to disassociate from mind. And one of the ways that you can do that is so from the Bhagavad Gita, from the Vedas, what they tell us is like there's certain times of day. So like roughly between 4 and 6 a.m. is a time called sattvic time, and it's time when the mind is actually asleep. And that is a time when you can actually experience, like, there's like a serenity around that time. And it was only from getting into the philosophy of Vedanta where you can only study it between 4 and 6 a.m. because it's too subtle. You like it, if the mind gets in the way, you're not able to see it. And it was only through then that, after years and years and years of getting up at that time, when I could disassociate from mind, where I can see mind. Because when you are totally in the mind, and like the Geminian person would be very in the mind, they'll be like, they cannot see it, because it's all pervading. And one of the reasons why with Gemini, it's about contact, it's about relationships, and it's what's called a mutable sense. So mutable just means, it can move, it's flowy, it's flexible. And what's more flexible than air? It's more flexible than air. And if we look at the world, so the air signs are, it's what doesn't the air contact? And that's the thing, is like the Gemini, it's just between everything. It's touching everything, but just the surface. And it can, you can look at things and like, I want to go deeper into that, but the mind will take you away. It's really, it can be quite difficult like that, because there's a strong desire for novelty and for just next, and it takes a lot of work for people with strong Geminian tendencies to disassociate from the desire for novelty, and to actually like go deeply into something. So it can be quite tricky. It can be quite tricky, and it's funny because sometimes there's like this third space, like this, I don't know, it's like another, just, guys, people talk about dimensions as if it's like, oh my god, it's this crazy wild experience, it can be quite banal. But one of my conceptions of the Gemini mind, it's like it's like that of a parachute, and you're trying to harness the air. So because guys, if you don't get the air, if your parachute deploys incorrectly, well, you're going to fall to the earth, as in quite quickly. But if you can catch the air, well, it's the safety, it's everything. You're chilling, you know. And that's what it's like with the Gemini in mind. You're trying to wrestle with it, you know. You're plunging through the air, but trying to catch the air, it's very difficult.
Yeah,
really, really, really difficult, and it takes a lot of deliberate practice to catch that mind. It's because just seeing the mind for a Gemini person, it's so difficult. We cannot see ourselves, you know. And guys, you're just out there, if you don't know, like, famous Gemini people, Donald Trump, you know, Boris Johnson, because the Gemini people, it's let's just say they have a way with words. They have a way with words, and it's so in astrology, you know, guys, I might be butchering this here, but it's also the different stages. It's the different stages of life, and Gemini, it's only the third stage. So in terms of the other signs, you know, it might be termed like a more immature sign, like it's early in the process. And one of the things is, when you're a Gemini, you can see a very clear relationship how words can move things. And a lot of Gemini guys, sorry, now not trying to ruin us for all of us, but a lot of Gemini people they're into sales, persuasion, influence, manipulation, because they see how the words work, and they're always testing and pressing, seeing if I say this word, what will happen. Because people say, oh, Geminis, they never shut up talking, but like it's like they're running tests as well, and they're seeing the relationship between things, because
probing with language.
With language. So guys, I'm a language teacher. So you have all of these different things, and guys, I'm just going to pull up something on linguistics, because as in it's very interesting, because Gemini person would say, I know, you know, as in they'll just, and children say that, they say, I know, and it's like, you know that they don't know. And it's the exact same with the Gemini people. They say, I know, because the mind will go so quickly, and it will make contact with it, but it hasn't a notion. And just like, as in, if we look at knowledge from top down, so it's context. You know, you to be able to understand context, to derive meaning, to add to the meaning, to select the information that you need, that's useful, that's pertinent, to integrating the information, and then to recognizing like the overall structure. Like, that is away from seeing things from the top down on language, to see, do you know? So if you can say, yeah, if you can do all of those things, then I could say, you know it, you know. But then we have it also from the bottom up. So like phonemes, which is, it's about recognizing word, not even words, it's consonants and vowels, being able to see, what does that, like, do you know what that is? And then we got syllables, and then we have words, and then we have syntax, you know, knowing where clauses and phrases end, and then we have intonation groups, you know, making use of sentence stress, you know, recognizing chunks of languages. So that's a way, that's like, so it's one of from the top down and one from the bottom up. And the Gemini mind will really do it from the top down. It will not, like, as in, we're not the fundament, like, we're like the fundamental stuff, we're not like, that's a more Virgo. And so Virgo is also
mercurial.
It's also a mutable sign, it's an intellectual sign, it's ruled by Mercury, and they would get the knowledge from the bottom up, but the Gemini would get it from the top down. We're looking at things from 10,000 feet, and we're analyzing things from the outside, looking down like that. So it's just seeing how the two different ways of observing of like knowledge, like what Gemini knowledge is and Virgo knowledge. Like that's my conception of it, at least.
Yeah, it's brilliant, mate. You've just given me a whole new understanding of why Gemini are known as the master communicators, because of, like, you know, just the way you just broke that language down was just like, yeah, it's really succinct. and to the point, you know, and this means of studying language and making language a study. I mean, there's a reason why the communication occupies 1/12 of our reality, is because our communication with each other is so important. You know, it's so important that it governs 1/12 of that wheel, the wheel of all totality, right? There's so much I want to open up in just what you just shared. I guess like one thing is like thought process, because I've observed you do process very quickly, like I'm just like, Jesus Christ, this guy's like, it's just, yeah, you're like, yeah, very good with words, very but the like you can process and come up with things very very quickly. And you know, you give me an insight into the Gemini and thought processes and how it can be kind of like you know, you describe this falling down a parachute and well, you're tangled in your parachute unless you catch in the air. So like your thought process, is it literally just like relentlessly like thought, and do you employ like some sort of like meditation or mindfulness to kind of like catch the air, as you
Yeah,
call it? Yeah.
yeah, because one of the issues with is like the mind touches everything. So just like the Gemini mind can pick up a lot of crap
Yeah.
because you're looking at all new things because it deals with novelty, but it's not very discretionary. It doesn't use its discretion. It just touch anything. Like
Yeah.
it's just going. It's like a baby putting its hands on everything, you know,
Yeah.
and like licking the floor. Like that's the Gemini in mind. It can be like, oh yeah, you know, and that's why some people think Geminis are dumb, you know, because they'll just think they'll say anything. They'll go, you know,
Yeah.
and fortunately, I have the Mercury in Gemini,
Yeah.
which brings an order and a rationale to the exposure to everything, and
Yeah.
it can put things together in novel ways,
Yeah.
but it will have a structure to it, and that's
Sure.
I'm fortunate to have that, because without that, like, oh my god, like
Yeah.
like you see why they say that's the dumb sign, you know, as in,
Really?
but but
Is that what they know? No, because I would have considered them one of the sharper signs.
the thing is, so I study Vedanta, and like we would call the difference between, you know, there's wisdom and there's intelligence. So Geminis are very intelligent,
Mm.
they know how to do things, but using judgment and understanding and wisdom, no, like not so great.
Mhm.
They're great, they're book smart, but they're not necessarily wise until
Mhm.
they acquire that faculty of, like, and that's where the depth comes in. That's why, you know, I've spoken about things from those 7 layers of processing,
Mm.
because the Gemini, the unenlightened Gemini, like, they'll have made contact with it, I know.
Mm.
But if you're the more discerning Gemini, you know, well, there's actually, you know, isn't it? So I've just described 7 ways of knowing from the bottom up, 7 ways of knowing from the bottom down, of just of how to come at a word. So that's 14 different ways of say, I know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's like, and you know, there's levels to the game, you know? There's
Yeah.
levels to the game. So as in, when you level up your standards of what I know
Mm.
it's quite humbling, because the Gemini can be, it's arrogant, because like, I know, oh yeah, I know, yeah, and
Mm.
but it hasn't, it's just touched it,
Mm.
it hasn't gone into it, it hasn't gone through the that layers, and that's why, you know, it has to be reined in like that, you know,
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
because otherwise you can know lots of things. Like I've just because of the age I am, many of my friends are Jupiter and Gemini.
Mhm.
So guys, Jupiter is like, it's the abundance, it's the flow, and it's the gift. And Gemini is, you know, one of the signs of intelligence. So they're very book smart. You know, it's like friends of mine are PhDs from Cambridge, got firsts, like, you know, all those kind of things, like very, very bright. You know, they're running tech startups and selling them, and like, they're very good at the world, but not necessarily wise,
Mm.
but they're smart. Like, you know, like
Mhm.
they can navigate the world very effectively.
Mhm. Mhm. Cool. It kind of brings up it'd be good to like explore like the opposition of Sagittarius like a little bit, and it's kind of like that dynamic, because
it's interesting. So I was doing a bit of study into Sag and Gemini and that opposition, and it was coming up that most of the other oppositions are really in opposition. They're really like kind of like Mars and Venus are like,
Yeah.
and Saturn and Sun, and they're really in opposition. But they describe uh, Gemini and Sagittarius not to be so much in a disharmonious opposition, because we got Mercury and Jupiter, which they're kind of actually buddies.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, they're not like they're not opposites. So like I've heard like Gemini described as like the student and Sag the teacher in some ways, but also it's just like what could you say about that axis in terms of information? Both signs are very much concerned with information, but in slightly different ways and slightly different spins.
So Jess and I, we'd be of a generation where we have Pluto and Scorpio.
Yeah.
With Pluto and Scorpio, so it's like it's a real thirst for knowledge and for depth of experience. But I'd have it in between the eighth house and the ninth house. So one of the things is that it's always, as in one of the shadow aspects of it is I was like very dogmatic as a child. I was like really like a bit of a religious, like woohoo, because it's compulsive, relentless. Like I know, it was very dogmatic, um, and wanting to tell other people what to do. So it's like all of these shadow aspects of Sagittarius, which is trying to tell people what to do. And one of the things about Gemini, like the more enlightened Gemini, like that's why it's a student, it's a student teacher thing. And guys, sorry, I misspoke earlier. Like, isn't Sagittarius is very much a I know kind of thing, because it's a very intuitive sign, whereas Gemini is Mercurian. We're thinking, as in, and that's why it's interesting to say that Sagittarius, like it's information coming from a higher source. Guys, Sagittarians don't get carried away. You're not all that. You might not necessarily have hit that thing of higher knowledge, but because I have the Gemini in the third house, which is of the student, so the gift of being like a great student, and like that is my gift in life, that I'm just like I'm not necessarily great at anything, but I'm a bloody good student. I'm bloody good at learning how to do the thing. And then through the ninth house, it's just wanting to know why. As in, so I'm compulsively asking why, and then do people's heads in, it's like why are you doing this? Why are you doing it? Because I really want to know. And my teacher trained, they're like, oh my god, he's like, who's this guy? He just keeps asking why are you doing this? But I need to know first principles, and that's kind of, so they can work really great together. Like they can work really great together. But the students, the Gemini is very relative, and the Sagittarian is very absolutist. Like broadly speaking, and there's a big humility that comes with it in Gemini. I said, I don't know. As in, I'm not, obviously the lower aspects of Gemini are, yeah, I know that, yeah. But the higher ones really get into, I don't know. Let's look at it.
That's a really nice segue, actually, because I want to ask, what would you consider to be the higher expressions of Gemini, and what do you consider to be the lower, more shadow aspects of Gemini archetype?
Just off the top of my head, like a fun one. Muhammad Ali. Muhammad Ali had Jupiter and Gemini. And Muhammad Ali, in some parts of his life, he talked a lot of crap. He said really terrible things about George Foreman, like really hurt the guy. Like years later, said really terrible things. And it's that sharp tongue. Like the Gemini guys, isn't out there gossip. Like, that's a really huge, ugly shadow aspect of Gemini. Spreading bad things, getting bad things to touch, and putting negative connections, negative relationships in people's minds and their own. And Geminis are poisoned by gossip. That's their poison of choice. It's like terrible gossip. Like, oh my God, it's very hard for Gemini oriented people to get out from that. Like it takes a lot of work. but he did terrible things. But then also Muhammad Ali, he said bloody brilliant things as well. And part of that is like Muhammad Ali is in so Muhammad Ali has the Saturn in the 10th house and Jupiter in the 10th house, and the 10th house is about your place in society and career. And Muhammad Ali, he had the downs, the Saturn and the setbacks, and he had the highs of the Jupiter and the transcendental. So he became this transcendental figure in society. And just some of the things that he said were just like, wow, oh my God, it's like, like where he said about the meetings, that fella never called me the N-word, so like his ability for the catch line, the catchphrase was transcendent, like unbelievable,
absolute belters.
And the thing is, another he's very transcendent athlete like Tyson Fury right now.
Just on that, did he have a Jupiter Saturn conjunction?
I can't say if they were conjunct, but they were in the same house.
Okay, because I was just thinking like Saturn the fifth, Jupiter,
bam. Yeah. But it was acting like that, it was acting like that. And nowadays we have Tyson Fury. So Tyson Fury was like, he was beat the unbeatable Vladimir Klitschko, and the guy, he's a great talker, but also he can just say terrible stuff, and people criticize him like, I sound like a used car salesman, and he does sometimes. He says terrible things, but he almost killed himself, and he went to really bad places. But then the way he's able to articulate his story of how he came from being like 50 stone to going back to being the great, like one of the greatest boxers ever right now. Like he's in the conversation. If there's one fight he needs to make, and then he could be like up there in the conversation with Muhammad Ali, as in like in terms of the greatness of like that, like no one historically would beat this guy. But his speaking is incredible. His quickness of mind, it's unbelievable. Conor McGregor, another Jupiter and Gemini guy, and he has he's got a foul mouth on him now because like he's lost the plot. But his chat, he was the greatest guy. He was the most transcendental athlete in MMA, and he became a crossover star that everyone in the world knew who he was, and it was from his chat. And he's just like, these are ideas of in the Jupiter Gemini, it does good, and when it does bad.
That's quite an interesting example, actually, because Conor McGregor, when he was on his way up, he was speaking and articulating in a totally different way to when he was on his way down. It's kind of like he lost the humility and he lost the humbleness, and just he was always like talking trash to be about that's part of the technique. But
some of his words were inspiring. Like when he would say the most inspiring things is like his start, like before he lost it,
Yeah, and it's interesting to see, like, when he started just talking the trash vibrationally through the spoken word, it was just affecting what he was doing in
poisoning everything.
It was poisoning everything, and then his demise came from there. And my personal thoughts are like a lot of that is to do with his speech and his communication and how he was relating in that way. It brought him up, but then he kind of forgot what got him to the game, and then bam, it took him down because of what he was creating through word. I want to ask about the aspect of the Gemini archetype of the twins. I've had this like really interesting experience in Gemini season this month. The house I've moved into has got two pairs of twins, two twin dogs, and two twin kids.
Oh God,
it's mad. And my landlady's Gemini moon.
Yeah, well, that should be no surprise to any of it.
It's just really funny to see the correlations there. It's just like, I've like kind of brought in all these twins in Gemini season. Just like, what is this? Like, what is it? I was chatting to the two little girls. I was like, I feel left out. I need a twin. Where's my twin? So like, what is the crack with like the twin nature of the sign? What does it signify?
Some fun trivia for you guys out there. But like, two-faced, so like, we can be coming at things from completely different angles, see things from two different completely sides, and that's part of the. Yes, his phone's got off, guys. but it's seeing things from the two sides, and that's part of the Gemini in German. But like, you know, just for a piece of trivia, it's like, you know, load of killers, like they're like serial killers are Gemini. It's like Jeffrey Dahmer, Gemini, you know. He, that glib charm, he's able to do the two faces. No, I'm not trying to say Gemini's are all killers, but but
a lot of them are.
It's the ability to switch.
Yeah.
It's really and that's what you're talking about with the Gemini.
What about like, because like everything's a double-edged sword, so like, you know, that's like I was called like a shadow expression. What would the light expression of that be?
I haven't reflected on that. I haven't reflected on that, as in I guess you can see twice as much good things, you know. As in, if you can do the bad, if you can be, you know, Jekyll and Hyde, there has to be some, you know, opposite where it can just see the good things of things.
Yeah. Because you know, it can't just be like, you
know,
because that's I love it. It's really funny because like you might get this, like sometimes when I tell people I'm a Scorpio, they wince.
Yeah.
And like Gemini's the same, so like people like consider Scorpio and Gemini like the worst signs of the zodiac.
Yeah. You know all of that.
So it's just like, you know, it's this really interesting dynamic whereby like a sign could be like so polarized, but it can't be that way, because no archetype is good or bad. It has the light and shadow polarities to it, but it's just like, it seems to be like two signs, Scorpio and Gemini, that people just focus way more on the shadow than the inherent light qualities.
That's for sure. That is for sure. Yeah, I know. I'd have to reflect on that. I'd have to reflect on that.
Yeah, no sweat. I want to pivot a little bit and just talk about like, okay, let's talk about like communication. So we've touched on it already. So like Gemini are known as the master communicators. So what does communication mean to you, and can you share any advice or insights around how to communicate effectively with others? Now, the reason why I'm asking you this question is because I would deem you as a highly effective communicator. You know, you have something there, like definitely, like, you know, astrologically it says it, you know, but like you have like a gift in that area, I would consider. So what could you say around communication?
I think one thing about communication is like, you know, I could talk about our love of words, you know, and the things, you know, one of the shadow aspects of it. I know I talk a lot about shadow aspects of it because I'm evolving myself, and I was in the shadows for long enough, but you can use words to beat people with. You can run around people, like, because a lot of people, if you're not that Gemini covered, they can be imprecise with their words, and they don't know clearly what they're trying to say. Like they're not able to bring it from the feeling to the mouth well, whereas a Gemini can do that very well. And it's not, and we're not saying it's come from the heart, but they're able to articulate themselves very easily, or with practice, isn't they can be quite articulate. And the thing about it is what the Gemini has is, what does a word mean? Like you need to start at first principles, because we say words and we actually, a lot of time, like, we just say a word because we heard it, we think we kind of get it. Well, you know, I say loquacious, you know, like I've heard the word, but what does that really mean? You know, as in, and one of the things is going to definitions. What does that word mean? Because we need to have a common ground for understanding of in communication. So if I'm using this word, it's because I know what it means, and I've looked into it, and I've looked at the definition, and I know what the word means. And remember I said, like, those 7 layers of processing, like of the top down processing. I will look at those words, like, what does this mean in this place and thing, and the Gemini will pay a lot of attention to that in a way that someone else might not. As someone else might, it's that attention to detail. Because people say, "Oh, Gemini, you know, attention to detail." We do, but just the things that like as in people say that someone doesn't have attention to details. Like I don't believe that. Everyone has attention to detail. It just depends what they're looking at. What are they paying attention to? What details are they paying attention to? And the Geminian one, it's on words. What did you say? Oh, and like as they go back to some stuff, so it can be tricky with words. Gemini can be tricky because it's very precise. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it's really interesting because my friend Jay, he came around here a couple of times, also a Gemini, and he's what I would describe as like a wordsmith. So very much looking at the etiology of words,
etymology. Yeah.
Oh, this is such an interesting study because, like, you know, when you start breaking words down and you know, into their different syllables and different words and their different meanings, you can see the origin of things and how language is constructed at the base layer, and how like all different etiologies are coming together based off of common sources. So, like, for example, like Latin being a common source for so many of the European languages.
Some of the Romance languages.
I just find it really interesting how you can break words down and really get into the meaning of them, but also, like, it's just like sometimes we're saying things without realizing what we're saying. So, like, I've stopped saying hello, for instance, because you're saying hell low. Right? Every time you're greeting someone with hello, you're bringing hell and a low into it. Good morning. Good. I'll stop saying good morning. It's just like, I'm wishing you a good morning. Which, if someone's died, great, have a good morning. But like, we're greeting each other with morning every day.
Well, that's a synonym. It sounds like it. It's not. It doesn't have the same meaning. And the thing about, like, the Gemini aspect is, like, language is the way to communicate consciousness to groups of people, to outside of yourself, because it takes a highly evolved person to do it wordlessly. And we have teachers like Sri Ramana Maharishi. No, it was the Vedanta one, but it was a thing called Maunam, and he wouldn't speak, but he was able to convey himself. But if you're not that guy, if you're not the light one, you need words. You need words, and if you know what the words mean, if you do that, if you pay attention to that, you can convey that a little bit easier.
Cool. Yeah. I think it's like, what is a word? What is this phenomenon that we're able to create through our intelligence? It's like, when was the first word spoken, and what kinds of words were they?
Wait, isn't it to kind of carries meaning? It carries meaning, and so at university we studied social linguistics and how the languages did you change little by little, and then sometimes they just change a lot over. It's like over Europe, like the difference between Portuguese and Spanish, and then Spanish and French, and then French and German we have a bit of a jump, and then German and Polish. So, like, that's going across a continuum, it's going across a piece of land, and there's these things that they carry, as in and I'm on my fourth language right now, and I do Irish, English, French, and now I'm learning Spanish, and there's just certain things that can't be conveyed in other languages. Like, they just don't have the expression for it. Like, just for example, like in German, like, they have a word for, like, not thirsty. Like, we say I'm thirsty. Like, that means, like, I need to drink, but they have a word that's explained to converse. We don't have that. We just say not thirsty. We have to use a negation of that. So the words convey different cultural meanings, and it's really mad. And that's one of the things about learning languages is I said to the guys, I think learning languages is one of the greatest consciousness opening experience, just for the way that it alters your brain. Like, it literally changes your brain, that you can just see things from another perspective. And maybe that's what they mean by the twins. Because because I'm the same person, but I am different when I speak French. I am different when I speak Irish. I'm different when I speak English. I'm a different person in each language.
Okay, yeah.
And that just, it's kind of mind blowing.
It ties into the mutable nature of things as well.
It ties into mutable, the flexible, flowing personality. That when I'm speaking different language, I am a different person, and people perceive me differently.
I like that. Yeah.
And that's with the Gemini, you get to wear many different faces with the different languages, which is just a bit of a mind bender, you know.
Yeah, straight.
And the thing is, that's why if you don't speak other languages, you cannot relate. You just can't relate to that aspect of Gemini. Because Gemini, it's about language.
I love that, man. Yeah, because I always I looked at the speed at which you learn Spanish, and it's just like, Jesus Christ, how did she learn Spanish in like 4 months or something?
Yeah, well, it was in 4 months, but it also was because I had, for like the, as in all the different subtasks that you need to learn language. Learning languages, it's like it's the hearing it, it's the speaking it, it's the recognizing the letters, it's the knowing how the letters sound when they're spoken, and then it's also knowing the words which describe those things. Because if you don't know the language of language, you know, we can say, you know, simple past tense, you know, it's like, you're like, what the heck does that mean? Because, and unfortunately in Ireland, like growing up, as in, we didn't learn much grammar. So as my grammatical knowledge isn't great, but I've learned it inductively. I've learned it just by seeing it. So as in, I'm like, oh, that's the structure they're using there, because like they use in French, they have a different tense than we have in English. It's called a subjunctive, and it's to express doubt or that something might happen. You have like a tense for that. Like, what? And in Spanish, they also have that tense. So just how different language, different cultures just have that different thing. And it's, as I said, it's just that Gemini thing about language. And just being able to see things from different perspectives.
So if you could boil Gemini down to a few keywords, what could you say? What keywords would you express?
Gossip. Gossipy, like is it, and there's, you know, there's ego about intelligence. There's, you know, it can be quite egotistical, think they're like the smartest guy in the room.
Yeah.
And curious.
It's a nice one.
They want to know what the relationship with everything is. Like, what? How's that relate to that? Putting things together, and like that's the beautiful thing about my friends. Like, you know, they with the Jupiter and Gemini placement, they see the relationships between things in such a beautiful way. It's like, wow, wow, and they learn things so quickly.
It's interesting because you know, like the third house on the wheel is also correlated with siblings and children.
Yeah.
I know fifth is also children as well, but it's kind of like that wheel is like the child realizes that it's something in Aries, then it realizes that there are things, the material world, which is Taurus, and then it kind of like comes back to this inquisitive nature, this curious nature of maybe the child, to like what you were expressing earlier in terms of asking why, wanting that understanding of all of these different aspects of life.
Well, I know that was the Sagittarian aspect, but it was just like, it is curious. It's like, but it's more just touching them. It's much more just like looking at them and see how does this work. But actually, you know, funny story, just like on some of those things on the Jupiter in the third house, which is, you know, that Geminian house. Like when I was growing up, so it's about neighborhood and short distances. So I have always had everything that I've needed in my life has been short distance. I've never had like long commutes to work ever. I've never had that, and I've never like woodwork in those things. Like even my newest job, like I started in a career as in 2 miles down the road. Everything is like,
don't need a car, man.
Never needed a car because I'm 35 years old. I can't drive, and I've never needed to.
Yeah.
I've never needed to. Another thing is when I was growing up, there was like 20 kids my age. Like that's another thing about the neighborhood.
Yeah.
I think like that everyone's just close by, and like honestly, that's one of the greatest things that I would love for you know, if I ever had, you know, family, to have that experience. But that's my journey, you know, as in it's my journey to have that. But you have that, and it's also about family. So I've got like not living anymore. Like, but he was 21 aunts and uncles, as in, you know, God rest a few of them. We lost him in the last year or so, but like a 41st cousins I have, like, and these are all the Gemini in the third house. So to see how it's expressed, 4 languages, and it's a really funny thing, you know, me and Jess, we had this little creative tension about this. So Jess has Jupiter in the 9th house, and I have Jupiter in the 3rd house. So Jess is all about like long journeys. Like his abundance is in long journeys. My abundance is in short journeys. But Jess is Saturn in the 3rd house, and the 3rd house is about short journeys. And I'm like, Jess, like, just give me a drive down to the shop. He's like, no, I'm doing something. and it's like, Jess, drive me to Bristol. Yeah, man, where are we going? And I'm like, Jesus, I just like, these shopping bags are heavy, dude. And he's like, no. And but like, he drives you anywhere. Like, just like, as in, we were trying to figure out a trip to France, you know, as in trying to like a little bus down there for the summer, and just like, yeah, I'll drive it. You know, it's like he'll drive like 18 hours, like no big deal. But like 5-minute journey,
mate,
he's like,
mate.
he's like, nah,
not taking you to the shop. You get knotted,
not
mate.
doing it, not doing it.
No way.
So it's really funny. Like, I just thought about that recently. So like, that's that short journey. The Jess just like, he's like, no, but he's like, on the long journey, he's your guy, you know.
That's so funny.
Yeah, I was thinking about that.
That's hilarious.
Because it was like, because me and Jess had all these little tension points, you know. I'm like, as with the short journeys, you know.
What other tension points have we got there? That could be quite fun to talk about.
Well, it's funny because, like, guys, you don't know me, but as in, it's like where we'd have, Jess would have like gifts where I'd have things I suck at, and vice versa. So it was really beautiful to come together and like just kind of have it out on some things, and then also compare notes. You're like, isn't
it's been a great learning. Learning.
Here's how you do it, you know. Like, as in, one of the things, Jess has Venus in the 3rd house, so it's the beauty in words. Like, Jess, like, when he writes,
I love listening to you speak.
But when Jess writes, like, isn't he writes so beautifully, you know. But the thing is, as in, like, but Jess can also stutter and stuff. But when he's written, it is the Saturn, but it's when Jess, he's got that depth in his communication though. When he does think about something, says something, and there's a beauty and a depth to it because of the Saturn brings a deep attention and focus to it. And Jess's superpower with, like, this is, I'm putting this as like the light side of Gemini, Jess's gift for acknowledgement. And I'm putting that like to see the relationship and to observe what's happening and to give voice to it. And that's like for me, that was one of the greatest, like, whenever someone leaves the house, I'm like, you know, someone like, oh, thank God that guy's gone, you know, or you know, or like, thank God that lesson's over. But just the lesson was the beauty of acknowledgement, as in voicing acknowledgement, putting voice to acknowledgement, because there's a lot of silent acknowledgement, but it's like in a lot of workplaces now, like, you know, it's hard to pay people, or, you know, that there might be some economic restrictions there. But the thing is, thank you is free. Putting voice to thank you, and like in a lot of places, like saying sorry, saying thank you, like these things they cost nothing. They are free. And that was what I learned from Jess of the speaking, and I was like, that's one of the beautiful aspects of putting language to appreciation.
Oh, thank you for your kind words, man. I'm touched.
No, but because like I'll labor, I just love doing it, but then I get pissed off sometimes. And Jess, you know, he would acknowledge it, like, you know, I got my little, I got my hit, you know, what I was looking for, you know. Then you get that little, like, because Jess would see that, and he'd have that gift where it's no imposition on him to give that. He has flow in that, and his beauty in that, and it's very nice. It's just very easy to work with.
Well, thank you, mate. I appreciate that, really do. And it's interesting that you know, talking about, you know, Saturn in the 3rd, because I have Saturn in the 3rd, but I'm very lucky to have some other planets which don't make that so hard. You know, one of them being Venus, and on that, you know, the speech is getting better, but when I have time, the writing is good because I have time to construct properly. It's you know, it's when it's you know, off the cuff. that I can sometimes struggle, which the podcast has massively helped me. I mean, like a big part of the podcast is helping me to move through and get better with my Saturn in the third. But my best friend, I know I've told you about this before, but my best friend back in Bristol, he's got a much harder aspect with Saturn in Scorpio as well in the third. And yeah, he's for many years had like a very difficult stutter. So whereas like you know, I had like other things and it's like a lot softer, and actually there's some things that, you know,
beautified at depth.
Yeah, that's been really helpful for me. I've seen with himself, you know, it's full blown stutter, but like to his credit, like to his massive credit, he didn't let it affect him, and actually he's got to a place whereby it's a lot less prominent now. So you know, I that's a nice segue into an impromptu question.
But I actually also had a stutter when I was younger. I have, because I have Saturn opposite Mercury. So guys, Mercury's about talking and communication, and I had Saturn opposite, so the energies kind of clash, and it's hard to harness that. Like it takes a long time to harness that. And in my early 20s, it was hard to concentrate, to deeply concentrate. But it's only through years and years of working on that, of, you know, catching that parachute, that I'm able to concentrate. Because that's one of the issues with the Gemini, like the less evolved Geminis, like not being able to concentrate and go into depth and stuff. And I had that also. And even today, I couldn't get a word out. I was like in classes trying to say something to kids. I was like, and the word ejaculated out, you know, like, and it's real, you know.
Yeah. Wow, yeah, that's great. Thanks for sharing, mate. I'd love to. I know you've done a lot of study in Saturn, on Saturn, and it'd be great to crack open Saturn a little bit with you, because I don't think I've spoken about it with anyone on the podcast yet, and I know you're very knowledgeable of Saturn.
I do my best.
One could say obsessed with Saturn.
Yeah, and you know, isn't someone said it to me, and it's nice, isn't so I have Saturn in the 10th, and the 10th is the house like of society, career, and how you're perceived in society. And I guess, like, you know, Jess is giving acknowledgement is like it's good for my Saturn, because it creates an anxiety in your place in society. Creates an anxiety about that. So guys, Saturn in whatever house, it can be anxiety or a self-imposed pressure or a sensation of pressure of to be something in this area. And because of the Gemini thing, so one of the things that, you know, I didn't go into that yet, but Gemini, we're not big feelers. We just think, as in out of any of the signs, probably one of the least feeling. So that can be tough for people, because it's like we just move on so quickly, like as in we don't get bogged down on things. And it's a blessing and it's a curse, because you're just not getting into things. You're not getting remember I talked with like the 14 levels of just like a word, right? Like you can just go, you know, so nothing gets us down, but then you never get any depth either. So you never get any of the big wins, but you never get any of the big losses.
Well, everything's a double-edged sword. I mean, like, you know, like Scorpio, who's like it's
all the depth.
We will brood and carry grudges for years sometimes, and just really just like that's one of our poisons in terms of just holding on to the you know.
And I'm not able. I'm like, I do not have the emotional energy. I'm not able to let it go. You know, and but the thing for the Gemini, so like why it's so interesting to learn about the Saturn, everyone out there, especially if, you know, we're all self-centered, you know, we're all the center of our world, and we're working on being unselfish, and, you know, one day being selfless. But when you know what your Saturn is, when you know where your restriction in life is, where your difficulty in life is, if you're one of the more people with difficulty feeling your feelings, it's a beautiful way to triangulate the feelings. Like, oh, so that part of life, they feels like I feel about this one, and that's why astrology is great for people who are very airy, because it's the difficulty in feeling, because it takes a lot of stillness to feel feelings for us. It's like it's very difficult, very difficult. Feel for others is like took like a lot of training. I remember like as in first time I like I only remember it afterwards, but like I hadn't cried in years, like years. And then I just remember the first hot tear. It was so cathartic.
Wow.
And it's like, so the astrology is great for that, for an air sign, because otherwise it takes so much concentration, so much stillness, which are hard won for, you know, the crazy winds are, you know.
Yeah, and I love it in that way that astrology could provide so much context. It's like the light in the dark, and you know, especially, you know, around different if you know that you're challenged in some area, it can bring context to that, and then it's out on the table and you can do something with it, rather than just like kind of maybe suffering without knowing why you're suffering, or knowing that you're suffering anyway. You know, and I think it's really astute that, you know, you're able to observe these aspects and then like do something with them, and also have that like radical, like kind of like that radical honesty with self, to be like, okay, that's there, but it's cool because I'll find a way around there. And but like the self-awareness is like, it's just really, yeah, it's because every single sign is a double-edged sword. There's the gifts, there's the challenges. So I think with living awareness of the challenges that astrology can bring us, we can navigate those astrologies. It's the map. Trying to get to America without the map.
And like, and that's why, you know, for my Geminian way of understanding astrology is like, I will go out and I'll read all the astrology books and I'll read every one of them about every planet and every sign, because for me it feels like I'm learning the language. Because, because it's difficult for me to feel it.
Yeah.
But if I can learn the language, if I can learn the grammar, the syllables, the context, the clauses, all these things, syntax, I can understand it, and I can put a language together which I can use to convey these things to other people. So it's about triangulation. Some people like can have direct contact with this thing, and I find it very difficult. But I'm also developing from the triangulation. I'm also developing something where I can hone in on, that's what that was, you know. But it's just, that would be how I would approach it.
Cool. It brings up like the kind of general archetypes in the language of life. You know, everything's always speaking. I just had this really, the way you're able to kind of like understand the world through the lens of the language. And this brings up like everything is always speaking. You know, sit in nature for a bit and you'll see how everything is speaking in a language. Well, put it this way: next time I'm going to go into nature, I'm going to look at things with a different light. I'm going to like look at things through, see if I can look through the Gemini lens and like see like, okay, what is the language of what's happening here? What are the elements trying to say? What is the wind trying to say? What is the water trying to say? And seeing it like that is, different, good perspective, I think.
Yeah, it's definitely something, you know. But the thing is, you know, everyone be true to yourself. You know, but you know, step into, you know, try the mask on. You know, it's like, as in this life, you know, it's a very Gemini mask.
Yeah, I mean, like I think there's something massive in archetypal embodiment as well when it comes to astrology. Like, you know, just because we don't have certain elements of signs in our chart doesn't mean that we couldn't call upon the energy. It's like, for instance, I don't think I've got any Sagittarius in my chart except my Jupiter.
Did you know?
Jupiter, yeah. But like, there was a time last year I was just like, I need to call upon that energy and use that energy. And even though I don't really have it, I can still kind of use it and embody it, because really, you know, we're all of that wheel. We're not just, you know, well, maybe we have more loaded qualities here and there, but we've got the potential to move into every archetype if we do choose.
Well, Jess, one of the things which, you know, I've learned is, I might be mistaken, but I think you have quite unaspected Jupiter. Is that right?
My Jupiter is a light trine with the Sun, like a light trine, and it's got quite a heavy opposition with Saturn and Neptune.
Oh, okay, sorry. No, because I can't like I have an unaspected jubilar, so it's just on its own. So sometimes the gifts of it are hard to, they're abstract.
Yeah, because they're not.
It's hard to feel into it because like it's not touching anything else.
Yeah. I got the opposition, so it's just like dong 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 dong.
Yeah,
Tension.
and it's a really funny thing for you guys out there. So I've got this thing on my chart called a hammer of Thor.
It's total lie.
And yeah, for sure. And it can kind of mean like quite brutal speech. I can get to the heart of a thing like really quickly and like really brutally. And that's one of my trainings in life, is to be mindful with the words, because I can misuse them. You know, me and Jess, like we have a very deep conversation about my misuse of words. And that's the thing, you know, is in with the Gemini, it's like those are your weapons. As in and you know, it sounds like, you know, sounds like quite Martian, you know, like quite warlike. But you know, words can be very harmful, very harmful. And especially Gemini, they know where to stick them, because they know how the words work really well. So it's a lot of responsibility. And you know, guys, you know, if you're listening out there, you know, it's nothing airy, you know, it's dry, you know, like, you know, some of the stuff we're talking about today is it's quite dry intellectual stuff. But that's, you know, that's part of Gemini, you know, as in the air, just it's like this is the world for us. It's not a very, you know, wet, wild feeling kind of situation. It's thinking, and thinking feelings.
If you were to give like an example of like a quality of air for Gemini, what could you say? So, because I've been trying to figure out, but I'm not sure. It could be like a tornado. Like, okay, so I figured out fire, like Aries being the cardinal fire, so like the fire starter, Leo being the fire that burns in the hearth, and then Sagittarius being like wildfire that darts around from one place to the next. Aquarius, I've got as ductwork, air that flows down a fixed.
Oh yeah, like that, like aircon, you know.
Scorpio's like the water that flows through a pipe. Fixed water.
Yeah, I know. I love this.
It's and like I find this really really helpful to think about it, and I'm trying to work out.
It's a fresh breeze. Gemini's a fresh breeze. It's fresh air.
Fresh air, yeah.
Fresh air, as in
yeah. Okay.
So a lot of people in my life are Capricorny and like quite like dry. They're quite dry, so but like they love me, you know, and I love them as well, because they keep kind of moody and sullen and stuff, and I'll bring a lightness and a novelty and a new things, and they'll ground me. So we're a breath of fresh air.
Breath of fresh air. I like that.
Breath of fresh air. That. Yeah, that's really it. You know.
Yeah. What would you call Libra? Do you reckon, in terms of that perspective?
Oh, Libras, as in guys, Libras, they're geniuses. Like as I've really come to respect the Libra intellect. Their way of thinking is, oh my god, like they're so smart. I haven't thought about it enough, but no, I'm not. I won't be drawn on that one. I can't. I can't produce that one.
Yeah, that's right.
Synthesize that one so soon. But no,
that's right. I've been trying to think of it for 2 weeks. So I can't, because it's interesting. It's just like I think we struggle to connect with what we don't have so much. It's just like air. I like. It's like I really struggle to connect, even though I do have my rising sign is an air sign, but it's still
because Jess has Mercury in the first house, and that quickness.
Yeah,
your mind just like jumps, as in, so guys, so you know, when we live in the Golden Beehive community house, and everyone, they come in and like everyone's got ideas of like how we should do things differently, and then they're there for a little while, and they're like, oh yeah, that's actually grounded in like it's actually very Libran. It's very precedent based. It's got like, it got there because we're quite established. It got there through precedent. You know, like there's a reason behind some of these things. And Jess, and you know, a lot of people coming like, what about this? What about this? And then you sit around a little bit longer, like, oh yeah, And that's the airiness just of the going into I know and judgment quickly. That like you have the air stuff, you know, that fast mind. The what makes you think that you know something, that's airy.
Gotcha.
So you have it, but you just like don't know that that's that quality. That's the airiness.
Yeah, no, I'll take that. Yeah. It's just so, it's like so interesting how, you know, there's no one balance, is there? Because we're supposed to be here to balance each other. Love to pivot actually to Golden Beehive. Actually,
Sure,
just like ask you
yeah.
about what is Golden Beehive all about, and what have we been building here? Because even though I've left, you know, I'm still
No,
still
just as
involved
a
with things very
big
much.
strategic partner, as in like similar to the guys. We love having Just Right and all the help he brings. Golden Beehive. So you know we're all students of a common. Well, not all of them, but the founding members, you know, had a common spiritual teacher, and it was just a mode of people coming together with the intention to live in community, not just an incidental community, like just, oh, I live in a place because I want to live indoors, and you know, these guys, I'll do something with them because they're here. It's like no. It's like these people, you know, want to be in community first, and then they come together. So the thing was like at the beginning, like it's like I know these guys from around, you know, like we're at the same, you know, lectures, we're at the same, you know, spiritual teachings, we're, you know, lots sharing some activities together, but I wouldn't say we're friends at the beginning, you know, like we weren't friends, you know, as in like acquaintances. But then wow, you can like you become better friends with men, and like you become with people, you know, from decades potentially, you know, because of that shared project together and people sharing such a deep value. At the heart of what we're doing, it's a, you know, it's quite Aquarian. You know, a lot of people talk about New Age, and that's what they'd be referring to. And the New Age, you know, the way it's manifesting, you know, like this year, artificial intelligence, you know, like that's part of it. And but the big thing of it, our big understanding of it is the rising consciousness through community, through being in community, through doing things together. Um, and you know, we kind of refer to places like it's a house of mirrors, and you can just see yourself reflected in so many people in all the different ways and all the different things. And there was a metaphor, you know, from one of my teachers who talking was like it's like when you put the dog in the house of mirrors and like it sees like 1,000 dogs and it's like wow, you know, and it sees all these dogs and it just taps out because it's like, oh my gosh, it just gets so overwhelmed by all that it sees. And that's what happens in a community house, because you're seeing yourself from all these different angles, and it just drives you mad in some respects, you know. Like it's amazing to be here, but like someone you want to kill someone, you know, or kill yourself, you're like, oh my god, these guys. You know, sorry, I'm not talking suicide, I'm not talking suicide, you know, but as in it's very reflective. It's a very potent medicine. And like obviously, you know, we're talking, if you know, if we said when you come into the world, you're coming in for certain classes, you know, it's like as in you're here to do these things and your transits through your timetable. Well, I mean, I was, you know, color me Aquarian, like I was all about this, you know, my emotional world is built upon that. So, you know, my emotional needs are fulfilled by creating communal structures. So the structures I create, like my wife, she brings things to like real life, you know, like there's real structures, but not quite in the ground, because that'd be like Taurian, like, you know, physical structures, but tangible ones. But mine are quite invisible communal structures, and that's what I would do. And I create ways and contexts for people to come together. And so, you know, even from the beginning I got here. And the thing is, you know, just one thing about being a community, you kind of got to wait your turn, because you got to see there is a logic to it. You know, there is a thing, and you have to watch when people have been there a long time, and because there is, you know, there is, you know, kind of respect for, you know, people that if you can hang in community for a long time, and even if you don't like that person, you should listen to what they say. If they're able to keep community going for a long time, that person, they know something. They know something, and the people who are able to stick in community situations for a long time, it can be quite interesting, because in my experience of having run like a load of communities, few people have staying power in community. They just like they're kind of a bit bouncy, um, and it's so anyone who would come to an intentional community is like, they are special. Like when anyone ever applies for to stay in the room here, I'm just like so excited to meet them. Like Jess, like as part of his journey to come and just like experience that community thing. Like it's just so intriguing to meet anyone who'd want to subject themselves to that experience of using community as a means of growing consciousness. Because it's we joke, it's like we're like the suburban ashram, but it's not like we're on our own. We're like we're doing things together, and sometimes it's not often we're doing things together, but when we do, it's like it really brings out very deep teachings, like very deep teachings, and it shows the gaps in our personality of like we're here to perfect our personality, and a lot of things they think, oh, you're doing this, but it's just all to create an environment whereby people can go and do this stuff, and people who lived in the community house. So like we have our teacher, and his teacher, and our whole lineage is about this Aquarian New Age, and as you said, it's very community oriented, and so many people who come from the house, they all like run communities. So it's like a lot of big characters, and it's like that's hard to manage. Like that's difficult because there's a lot of big personalities. Like Jess has his own community. Like he's running an event tomorrow. 20 plus people to the house, and people listen to what he says. And then there was guys Joe and I stay, and they run a big community over in Lithuania. And there's Nadine, and she has a big community in Bristol. It's not a big community, but it's like there's a depth to the work. And all these leaders coming together, and it's like a community training school of how to run community and of how to do it intentionally, deliberately. Like that's like wow. Like even a lady's moving to replace Jess. Like one of her dreams is to create a breakaway community over in Wales and like get some land, to get some folks, and to think that we can be part of her journey to learn about community, to like learn how to function at a practical, grounded level. That's just so wow. Like it's just like just all the new communities. Just had like the Gymbia, which was like a very community oriented gym. But the thing is, like even when you but it was a business. It's a business, but it was a social business. But like even when you take the business out of it, and you just community, it's a very pure form, because it's quite actually difficult to deliver, because it's just doing it from your own heart, and what you want to do, and other people, when they're not buying something or when they're not selling something, it's work. Like it's very interesting. Like.
I just want to jump in there and say that there's a lot of people there's a lot of people with dreams of setting up intentional communities, getting land and doing that, which is great. Like, I'm really up for it, and this is kind of like the trend of the times, which I'm seeing, which is fantastic. I think a lot of people going into intentional communities or having this dream,
it's just a dream,
really need to also understand what needs to go into that dream, because it is I think we had the house really nice, like when I was here, and I know it took a lot of work preceding that to get to that place. I don't think a lot of people realize how difficult it is to hold things together,
and it's so hard,
and manage people, because like, man, like you're never gonna please everyone. People are people piss people off, and just like living here has just really helped me to appreciate the level of work, but also the level of consciousness that's needed to hold an intentional community together. Because if the solid foundations aren't in place, if the structure is not in place, if boundaries aren't in place, if mutual understanding isn't in place, and a whole other ream of list of things aren't in place, you're going to have a mess, and it's not going to work. So I think like I think this is really important for people to understand that are looking to set up communities, because like I think there's a lot of hard lessons that a lot of people will naturally learn. Yeah, how do we learn? We learn better through the hard lessons than through the easy lessons. But I would it kind of makes me think it's like it'd be great to have like a community building school, and like
you Jess,
oh, we're in it, yeah.
you did a year in it, dude,
Yeah, it's just interesting, and I really wish the very best for anyone who's setting up an intentional community. I would say at the same time, like get really, really clear on a lot of things and managing people and structures that need to be in place for that to happen, and the right people as well, because you know,
but even the wrong people they'll teach you nothing about community, because
yeah,
we've had the right ones, we've had the wrong ones,
yeah,
and everyone is part of that journey, and they reflected a part of us, and sometimes there's an ugly side of us,
mm,
sometimes a beautiful side, but but it's in, like, just for instance, like just a very practical thing, like Jess is running an event at the house, and because of things that I did, of how I disregarded people's feelings in the past, and I just like ran things through without consideration. Like, it creates cultural baggage in the house of, like, people can even be like against community events, even though it's a community house. But the thing is, because I'm not doing things in a communal way, and I'm not using my words to articulate the things which are ways to diffuse people's anxiety,
mm,
it creates resistance in the vehicle that's meant to accelerate.
mm,
And even the fact that that's being brought up, it's like, it's just wonderful. It's just like, it's to be able to do that, as in, it's very special, but it's very lot of, it just isn't. They say, 3 years in the house is like, 20 years outside.
mm,
And I'm coming around to that way of thinking, because
mm,
it's really accelerates these things, because a lot of people, you know even if you who say they're into community, like, they go down to their house, and they, as in, they're at home, and it's they call the shots, and
mm,
like in our place, like, it's consensus, like, it's
mm,
consensus. That's hard. It's hard to build consensus,
mm,
you know.
mm, mm,
So
mm,
it's bit deep. It's deep, difficult
mm,
work.
mm, mm,
Beautiful, but I mean, like, it's, and then, like, is in even at our house, like, when the first people left, and like, it was no longer students of our teacher, and we're sure, like, we had massive anxiety, like, oh my god, like, oh, well, how can we, and then it was like, no, we took people in and with us, and they learned about community, and some got it, some didn't get it, and like, it went up in flames, and some guys went really great, as in, and that's the point, like, is in, it can't just be this inner loop of just helping ourselves. It's like, it has to be helping other people, and being of service to the community,
mm,
which is, it's hard, because there's part of us which craves familiarity, and then when you start running the numbers, and like, you start figuring out, like, so we now know how to find people, and like, we get great people, but we know that, like, on average, every like 5 months, like, history has shown us, like, every 5 months, 6 months, we will have one person go. That's it. Like, so we know that. Like, we've got a few, like, really solid people, but you don't even know. Like, as in, but there's some people, like, the guys who's like, everyone who's came to the house from the beginning, they're all gone except for one person. Only one guy is here from the start.
Andre.
Yeah. So
OG.
yeah, the OG. So keeping the culture, and I, like, and Jess, unfortunately, Andre has ruled, like, because he's seen some people go, he's like, oh, you gotta be here a year before I talk to you, it's like, and it's not the most progressive strategy, but if you get in with the guy, like, you feel a real sense of achievement, and like, he's a great guy, and he carries a lot of wisdom, but
I never quite got that. I wanted to.
yeah, no,
I really wanted to.
it's just, it's a matter of time. It's a matter of time. There's nothing. It's and that's what it's like. It's like a baby, it's like, oh, you're pregnant, great. Well, you still gotta wait 9 months. You see the baby, you gotta wait 9 months, and that's it. And some of the things in community, you just have to wait. You just have to put in the time, and like, it's hard, because there's talk where, time is relative, the relativity of time, like, some moments in community just feel so long, so intense, so deep, so troubling. and that's, you know, that's difficult to contend with, and that's why a lot of people, like, when they're talking about intentional communities, are they? No, you don't have to be prepared for it, because, like, I don't know what's coming around the corner. As like, I don't have a clear vision of what it is, but I just know that my soul just guides me that this is the way to grow. But is there a willingness? Are you willing to go there and to be honest with yourself? And that's not for everyone to be that honest, because it requires a lot of looking at yourself, reflectivity.
Which is naturally, difficult for a lot of people, because we don't want to. There's the thing we need to look at.
Yeah.
Oh, I want to look over here, look over there.
Yeah.
And that's the work. That's the work. That's the work
That's
we
the work.
do.
This
How
is the
about
way, you know?
this is the way. Oh, leave me hanging, man. What about the events section and side of Golden Beehive? Because I know we have a lot of good things that have been happening and are happening. We just had a Mayans visit, so yeah. What could you share about the events side of things, mate?
So, you know, like, I'm sorry, guys, I'm going. It's a philosophy, you know. It's in part of it is it's our respect of the indigenous people and people who've had uninterrupted community living situations or uninterrupted traditions. Of, you know, got work people coming out, and they've never been dominated. For 2,500 years. That's like insane. So they've had an uninterrupted culture, and one of our belief systems is, like, they know something worthwhile, and you know, if they're willing to come out and share, like, we're willing to help them. And well, one of the things, one of the reasons why that's, like, it's karma, as in, because you can never pay your teacher back for what they give you. You can never do it. But the only way to do it is through karma. And it's a form of devotion, is to just, like, help the mission. Like, he's just helping his teacher out, and his teacher's helping his teacher out, and it's a lineage, and we're all just pulling together in the same direction. And that one, and it teaches you about unselfishness, because in our events, we don't, like, it's not for money. We're not a charity either. Like, we're not, you know, we're not, as in, like, there has to be some fair exchange. You know, people have to, you know, we all gotta look out for each other. But it's a lot of, like, just how many hours do you think you put into that Mayan trip?
I don't know, loads.
Did you get paid anything?
No.
And what it teaches you is what.
Although to be really
you got
fair,
looked after.
to be really fair, I got looked after. Yeah.
But it wasn't